In this video, we'll be looking at guards where I would personally not recommend skipping points in the ultimate. That doesn't imply that you're not supposed to skip other points in order to get the ultimate and something else together, but you should generally level the ultimate when possible. This is more or less part of a 3-video series, and this is the third part. The first and second part will be linked right here. They address the guards where you should generally skip points on the ultimate and where it's debatable whether you should or not do that. All the disclaimers from the first 2 videos still apply. Let's jump right into the guards. Number 1. Agni. Agni gets 35 times 3 damage if you hit all 3 bombs, so 105 damage out of his ultimate. While other abilities also give you decent amounts of damage, the ultimate is just way too potent as a zoning, damage, and otherwise helpful tool, so I would not recommend skipping it, simply because there's so much raw damage coming out of dropping all the bombs in one place. Anubis. Anubis gets 150 damage and 5 seconds cooldown reduction out of his ultimate. I don't think there's even any question here. Even though other abilities also give him decent amounts of damage, the ultimate is just the core tool of Anubis' kit if you want to blow a target up and you want to get as much damage as possible out of that. And especially the cooldown reduction emphasizes this, as you will be able to use your ultimate more often. Bacchus. Bacchus gets 125 damage and 10 extra power out of the ultimate. That's a pretty high base value for a Guardian on its own, but then again, Guardians don't really depend all too much on damage. The reason why I would prioritize the ultimate regardless is the fact that there's no other ability that's really worth leveling over it. The CC on the 2 doesn't get extended by leveling, neither does the one on the 3. The 1 gives you some extra defense and stuff, but it's not really worth putting these extra points in there when the ultimate gives you so much on its own, and Bacchus is a relatively damage-reliant support. Bastet. Bastet gets 10 damage per hit more on her cats. The cats get 50 extra HP and 10 extra protections. Bastet is a lot about her cats. Her ganks are a lot more effective as long as her ultimate is up, and her split push is better with the cats, so everything speaks for having those cats. And 10 extra damage translate to 30 extra damage with all 3 cats, meaning you get at least 60 extra damage out of this ability as long as you land it close to the enemy. Also, the rest of Bastet's kit is just really not as strong as certain abilities on other assassins would be, for example, Feather Step on a Willish. Her damage comes from the ultimate, her potential comes from the ultimate, so if you skip points on the ultimate, you'd have to play her very, very differently from her normal playstyle, which I would generally not recommend, as she just works more efficiently this way. Chiron. Chiron gets up to 135 damage out of his ultimate as long as you hit all 3 shots. The damage is not even the most important thing here, assuming you're not always going to hit those 3 shots, but rather the fact that it increases your chance of survival if your ult has more damage via the additional effects of the ultimate. So in the end, if you're not dealing a killing blow to someone because you didn't have that extra damage in the ultimate, it's going to be more than frustrating, so I would recommend leveling it. Freya. Freya could be among the slightly more debatable ones. I just feel like as you're getting 120 extra damage out of the ultimate, it's a nice cleanup tool. Often you're going to use the ultimate to escape from sticky situations, but at the same time, what you're going to do with the ultimate a lot is finish off a target that your combo before that wasn't able to finish off. And generally the damage you're getting out of the steroids should be slightly less. Also, the fact that it's AoE in a small radius and you're not vulnerable while using the ultimate means that it's kind of easier to apply in regards to how it works. And I would say 120 relatively safe damage is something that I wouldn't want to pass up on. Geb. Geb is slightly more debatable, but not to that extent that I would say he's actually a debatable character. As you would lose 5% in total damage, 5% health of the enemy target, and 0.1 second crowd control in a large radius against many targets, I wouldn't see many scenarios where you really want to skip it. There are reasons, like if you really need to max that shield out at some point, but those scenarios should be so rare that I would want to level that hard crowd control ability which has a decent amount of damage for a character that otherwise doesn't deal much damage first. Hades. Hades gets 120 damage, a 5 protection debuff, and 10 extra protections out of his ultimate. I would say that's a value that makes it justifiable to level the ultimate. Even if some targets will get out of the ultimate relatively quick, if you're able to use the ultimate effectively, this should still help you a great deal, and Hades is a lot about his ultimate, so that extra damage will do a lot for you. Yes, you could theoretically go into the 1-3 if you're just focusing on fighting a single target and that way get some more damage off on them. But how often are you actually going to focus on fighting a single target as Hades? And if you are, why are you picking him? So I would generally prefer to not skip any points in the ultimate here. Habois. Habois gets 80 damage off the ultimate, and I could see why in rare scenarios you could think that it's maybe not the best deal if you're really just looking to use the ultimate as an escape. But those scenarios are so rare that I would generally say max out the ultimate when you can. It is such a huge damage spike, and on top of that, it allows you to hit multiple targets very easily, and it's also something that will allow you to finish off a combo. If you're using your 3-1, and then the target gets away with a decent amount of health, then the ultimate will often be the one to finish him off. You can poke enough before with your 3 either way. His other abilities get 50 extra damage per level point, so it's not like they're far off, but when you're a character that's so reliant on a burst combo, I would prefer to get as much as possible out of that. If you're really just looking to poke with a 3 and you think that's more important for you, you can skip a point and put it in a little later, but at least before you ever max the carpet, you should definitely have the ultimate maxed. Hunbats. Hunbats gets 55 extra damage in ticks and plus 0.25 seconds crowd control in the ultimate. The crucial point for me here is the crowd control. Even though the extended duration is not really that much, it is very crucial because it's such a viable tool on Hunbats in such a large radius as well. And because of that, I would not want to skip it. It's just such a game-changing ability overall that changes how the character works, that makes the character as impactful as he is. And by losing the ultimate, you have some more 1v1 potential, but I wouldn't trade that for what you get out of the ultimate overall in a team fight. Isis. Isis should not even be a question. She gets up to 160 damage, up to 80 healing on the first ranks, and it gets even higher because the scaling increases with the levels. So there's no discussion about Isis ultimate. Just don't skip points in it. Done. Izanami. Izanami is one of those characters where I would not skip the ultimate because she gets 90 extra damage out of it, and she also gets 0.25 seconds extra silence. That CC is very strong, the burst damage from the ability is very strong, and as burst is usually better early than later, I would just try and max this whenever possible, simply because it offers you a lot more direct boxing potential in a 1v1 setup or in a team fight. Kukulkan. Kukulkan gets 100 extra damage and the ability costs 10 extra mana. Once again, one of those characters where I would not debate that. Kukulkan is a lot about blowing people up with his ultimate. You could get a lot of damage out of the 3, but it kind of defeats the purpose of Kukulkan, even though a lot of the damage will come from scalings as well. You want to get that maximized damage out of the ultimate, otherwise you're no longer really a threat, because once your tornadoes drop, you only have your 1 to get away, and your 2 as an escape, and enemies will just turn on you if they realize that your ultimate is not dealing enough damage. Kumbhakana. Kumbhakana gets 2 instances of damages, first when he hits the target, then when the target lands, adding up to a total 125 extra damage. He also gets 5 seconds cooldown reduction on the ultimate. I know that the mess is also a great thing to level up later, but the ultimate is just very, very potent at taking someone out of a team fight, and being able to do that more often and deal more damage while doing so will increase his effectiveness greatly, especially since he has enough CC in his kit as is. You're not so reliant on maximizing the duration of your CC anyways. Medusa. Medusa gets 100 extra damage and a 5% slow, versus if she was to level the 2 instead, another 45 extra damage. As she is more of the ability kind of hunter, not completely focused on ability damage, but rather leaning towards the ability side, I would try and get the maximized damage out of that. Similar scenario as with Izanami, and the extra slow is also very nice, so I would say go for it and don't skip the points here, as nothing else in her kit is really equally potent. Naja. Naja is one of those characters where never skip the ultimate. The ultimate gives you 120 extra damage if you crit, which you should unless you're actually so bad that you can't click the button in time in order to crit. And that's only without Deathbringer, so with Deathbringer the extra damage becomes even more. Nothing else comes close directly. You could do some ring toss bouncy stuff where you could get similar numbers, but overall that's such a rare scenario compared to just landing the ultimate on someone that I would recommend just sticking to the ultimate, because Naja is a lot about blowing people up with the ultimate and then getting out. Neith. Neith gets 65 extra damage and an 0.1 second stun. Now this doesn't sound all that much because you won't always get that full damage unless your ultimate is fully charged and all that stuff. The reason why I would never skip this is because the most frustrating thing that can happen to you is you ult someone that's low health, you're about to pick them off, and then they get away because you didn't put a point in the ultimate. Same going with the CC, if you're sending out the stun for someone to kill the target just at the beginning of a fight, and the stun just lasts that split second too short for it to work properly, then you'll definitely regret not putting that extra point in. Nemesis. Nemesis gets 5% extra HP damage, so the same as Gab, and the ability costs slightly more mana. Now this is nothing crazy, and I could see why people would want to skip it sometimes, but I feel like this 5% damage is very, very crucial to Nemesis. Your ultimate is your core tool in anything you do, and you want to maximize the damage you get out of that so you can slice and dice the enemy down afterwards and kill him with a few more shots. And if you're not able to do that, then Nemesis' purpose is kind of defeated, unless your target is completely bursted by the rest of your teammates right after, which you can't always rely on. So I would want to have the maximized damage in there, also because I think the other abilities are not worth leveling to the same extent. Maybe the shield can sometimes be helpful, but overall I would say stick to the ult in most scenarios. Nuwa. Nuwa is an interesting one because there are quite a few people who think that you should skip points in the ultimate. The ultimate gives you 75 extra damage per level. The point here is that you're hitting 5 targets with it, and that brings you to 375 extra damage per point in the ability. Now many people will say, well, it's split about 5 different targets, so it doesn't really matter, but in the end it's still a lot of damage and you may help a lane with it that you weren't expecting to help. Yes, it doesn't do all that much early game. Yes, the scaling is probably more important for the damage of the ability, and late game this is much more potent, but I would still not want to be the one to let a target get away and drop a kill because I wanted that extra point in my minions. So there is this tiny reason to skip it, but realistically, most of the time you just want to put that point on the ultimate because it is still a very potent ability. Poseidon. Poseidon gets 65 extra damage in the center and a 0.25 second extra stun, and the ability costs 10 more mana. Now, there would be reasons to maybe level other abilities here, Whirlpool for example, but overall, I think that's what you're gonna max first anyways most of the time, and especially his 2 isn't as potent early on, and his 1, while also giving you decent damage, it just doesn't offer the same potential as a huge-ass radius Kraken that will deal a ton of damage either way. And you want to have that damage from the Kraken be a threat to the enemy team because it's such a huge AoE radius, it hits so many targets if you place it properly, and it is your main burst damage. Despite of you having other abilities that deal damage too, the Kraken is what you will kill someone with. And lacking some damage there and also lacking that extra CC is just not beneficial in most scenarios. Ra. Ra gets 75 extra damage and 5 second cooldown reduction on his ultimate. Actually, his 1 is not much worse in that regard. It gets 60 extra damage, so just by that raw base number, the ultimate doesn't seem that good. But the 5 seconds cooldown reduction are huge here in my opinion, simply because it allows you to use your snipe more often, and the snipe is so potent when it lands on someone, all potential scalings aside. And free cooldown reduction is something that I would value very highly on a character like Ra, so I would not skip any points. Raijin gets another straight 120 extra damage out of leveling his ultimate. I don't see any reason not to. It's a lot of damage, Raijin is all about damage, it's a wide radius, a wide line, that is easy to confirm on multiple targets sometimes, so it's even more damage then. I don't see anything coming close in regards to what it offers for a team fight especially, or even for a 1v1, so don't skip any points there. Ram actually gets up to 225 damage out of his ultimate if he lands all shots, which you're not always gonna do, but whatever. It costs 10 extra mana, which is a bit of a downside, but not too bad. And I really think that you should maximize the ult whenever possible, because you want to kill off targets with those snipes, similar to other finishing abilities like Nuwa, for example, where it's just too important to have the potential to kill someone that's getting away with a low amount of health and not run the risk of dropping a kill because you didn't put that extra point in. Raven. Raven gets some crazy stuff out of his ultimate. He gets 75 damage, 5% damage reduction, and 0.5 seconds extra duration, and minus 5 seconds cooldown reduction, while the ability costs 10 extra mana. Well, did you list all of that? Well, anyways, many people think that you should skip the points on Raven just for extra boxing potential at early stages, but I would disagree. Simply because the ultimate is so versatile. It allows you to get damage reduction, which lasts longer. You get some more damage on top of that. And you have a cooldown reduction. So even if you're only going to use the ultimate as an escape tool, the cooldown is lower each time you level it. And that's why I would think that it's not all that smart to skip points in it, even though you could theoretically. And while the logic follows the same concept as Sun Wukong here, who I put into debatable, his ultimate just offers less. Sun Wukong only gets that 50 extra damage and 5 seconds cooldown reduction, whereas Raven gets so much more in one single ability, and you can actually blow up targets with the ultimate as well decently if you place it right. Scylla. Scylla is one that has been asked about a lot. So with Scylla, what you want to do is you want to skip points before the ultimate so you can maximize crush for the passive and the ultimate at the same time. Definitely do that. That's absolutely important to do on Scylla, and I would never recommend doing anything else. But I would also never recommend actually skipping points in the ultimate. The ultimate gives you 100 extra damage, but what you have to keep in mind is the reset mechanic. Whenever you kill someone, you can use your ultimate again. Whenever you kill someone, you get 100 extra damage. And if you are not able to kill a target because you didn't put a point in the ultimate, or not enough points in the ultimate rather, then you're gonna lose that reset mechanic, because if your ultimate doesn't kill the target, then there's no point in using it in that regard. You can still use it for the damage, but it's just not quite bringing the whole efficiency of that ultimate to the table. And if you hit multiple targets with one ultimate, then you're gonna get 200 extra damage. So I would not skip any points in the ultimate, despite of what some people here seem to think. Do not skip points, just make sure to skip points on other abilities to get Crush and the ultimate together. Serket. Serket gets 114 true damage out of her ultimate. As it's true damage, there is no discussion how bad or good this is. It's just above everything in terms of damage, and I would not skip it ever, just because it can kill targets so easily, and those extra 100 damage will take away a lot from the target. Do not skip points here. Sobek. Sobek gets 150 extra damage, assuming that the ult is fully charged, an extra 5% slow, and the ability costs 10 more mana. What I think is the most crucial part here is that he gets 5% more slow, as this allows him to give better setups for his team, and this is a CC tool in that regard, and his other abilities don't really offer something similar, as the CC there is locked in the duration it has. I will level this whenever possible. On top of that, the extra damage is nice even if you're playing in solo lane. You're gonna use the ultimate on Sobek a lot, sometimes even to just replenish mana, so I would not skip points here. There's nothing in his kit that would justify skipping those points, because I don't see any other ability being equally potent. Terra. Terra gives 5% cooldown reduction to everyone, and the heals increase by 100. I think the 5% cooldown reduction is actually the more crucial part here, but either way, I would not skip point in Terra's ultimate. Her kit is a lot about the ultimate, and as you get the cooldown reduction yourself, you're actually able to use other abilities quicker again, so any scaling that would work against that will also basically benefit from the ultimate, so don't skip points here. Thanatos. Thanatos is one of those that people find a little more arguable. What Thanatos gets out of his ultimate when landing it is actually just 35 damage and a 4% threshold, bonus threshold then compared to lower levels, and the ability costs 10 extra mana. And I can see why some people would not want to level that early on, as you basically get more damage out of other abilities, and 4% of your health is not that much early when you have that other damage which actually chunks more than 4%. I would still not skip the ultimate. Just having that threat of being marked at a certain threshold of health will completely change the playstyle of the enemy, and if that threshold is higher, that will occur earlier, and those 4% can be crucial, especially when you're not the one bringing the target that low in health. So while I could see the reasoning here, it's more of a psychological reasoning than anything else that I would say I would still put the point in the ultimate just to scare off the targets. You also indirectly buff the 2 that way, because as long as someone's below the threshold, you're going to be able to catch up with the 2 better as well, maybe allowing you to apply your 3 or 1 once more than you would have otherwise. So all in all, I would just not skip it for that very reason. It's somewhat in a similar sense of people standing in lane charging neath ultimate to clutter comms, that with Thanatos, you're just more of a threat when the threshold is higher. Last but not least, there's Zeus, and Zeus is also one of those that has been debated. Zeus gets up to 100 extra damage in ticks out of his ultimate, whereas he would get 60 damage on his 1, assuming we're hitting 2 bounces on the 1, which I think is a reasonable amount most of the time. Now, why would I still level the ultimate even though it's in ticks and you can get out of the ultimate area? The reasoning here is somewhat similar to, for example, Poseidon. You have a huge area tool, a huge zoning tool, and while it scales better with the percentage scaling of your damage, it still becomes a lot more of a threat the more damage it deals. And if an enemy ever realizes they can walk through it without immediately dying, then they will. And by having that AoE damage in team fights, you can apply a lot more extra damage than the numbers here says. And even the one with the bounces, assuming you only bounce it on enemies, will not get close to those numbers if there's any CC setup or anything like that. Zeus 1 is definitely not a bad ability to max out instead. And I can see why some people would do that, but I'd rather point skip something else in order to max the 1 and the ultimate at the same time, just because of that huge area denial that you get that way. And also the chance that you will survive in your ultimate. If you're ever caught off guard, then you have to trade as Zeus. You don't really have an escape that will get you out. So if you drop the ultimate on yourself, then it's a lot of a question about how much damage will that ultimate deal. And you might get the full extra 100 damage here in order to make sure that the enemy who is on me will have to go away from me. And while in that scenario, even there, the 1 can deal more damage, especially when you have more than 1 target coming towards you. The ultimate will usually outweigh that by a fair bit. So both have the reasoning here. I would personally not skip the points simply because I think it's such a potent ability overall. I could see reasoning against it though. And with that, we're actually done with all gods. I will link once again the first 2 parts here if you're interested in those as well. I hope this was interesting. I hope the numbers help you consider your choices when to level an ultimate or not. I hope you got your own opinion on this stuff as well, and if you have, let me know in the comments down below. I know there will be some discussion about certain characters, especially here in the don't skip section, because I feel that there was a lot more discussion going on about those characters beforehand already. So I can see why certain points I made will be disagreed with, and I'm absolutely fine with that. Either way, thank you guys for watching. I will actually hopefully see you later for the patch notes review tonight. Duke Sloth, out.